Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? The evil queen had a magic mirror, and every day she asked the same question: who is the fairest of them all? And every day it confirmed her, until one day it didn't. And her response was not to examine her own insecurity. It was to destroy the thing that exposed it. My name is Colin Charles. This is Enoch Marketing, and this is going to be the most fun episode for me to record. Let's get into it. Today we're talking about Law 11 of Robert Greene's Laws for Human Nature. And in this chapter, he's discussing the grandiose leader. So, what that means to him, he opens Law 11 warning about one of the most seductive human traps in all of the human experience, and that is early success. Early success feels like proof. Proof that your judgment is sound, that your instincts are right, that the results validate the person behind them. And in small doses, that confidence is useful. It produces boldness, risk-taking, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. But when success compounds without resistance, when every decision seems to work, when the praise flows without challenge, and when the people around you start reflecting on your greatness back at you, then something dangerous happens. The grandiose leader emerges. And the grandiose leader has stopped listening. They've stopped questioning themselves. They have mistaken past success for a guarantee of future success. And they begin to overreach into territory where their actual skills do not support the ambition. Greene writes, "The root cause of grandiosity is the confusion of the feeling of power with actual power. Those who experience early and large success often mistake the two." Greene contrasts the grandiose leader with what he calls the realistic leader. The realistic leader knows the limitations of their own knowledge and judgment. They actively seek out challenge and criticism. They surround themselves with people who will tell them the truth. They understand that past success is data, but not destiny. The grandiose leader surrounds himself with people who confirm them. Yes, men. And that confirmation, like the magic mirror, feels like wisdom, until the time where reality steps in and ruins their plans. So, grandiosity is the shadow of the weak and feeble ego. Now, if you've been listening to this series and you're starting to put the pieces together, we're going to start to tie laws 9, 10, and 11 into one thread. And we're going to go back to the root of grandiosity precisely. Grandiosity is not confidence. It's not strength. It's not even power. Grandiosity is the shadow of the weak and feeble ego playing itself out. We've covered this in Law 9. And how the repressed inadequacy that goes underground drives behavior from below. And then we cover this again in Law 10 with the fragile ego, talking about how the defend itself cannot tolerate a threat to its self-image, i.e., the insecure ego has to put up walls and manifest essentially an environment that only continues to stroke and satisfy their ego. Grandiosity is what happens when these two forces combine and the person never does the internal work to confront them. The grandiose leader is not too confident. They're not confident enough. And the performance of the superiority is a defense mechanism. They need to be seen as the best, and that is a symptom of the terror that is being found as opposed to as a result of their insecurity. And that's the trap. And that's why Greene warns about it in this law, because it's not a personality flaw per se. It's a human pattern. And it shows up everywhere there's success, where there's hierarchy and there's an audience. So, mirror, mirror on the wall. This is my thoughts on this story. Now, I love Disney. I love Disney. I love Disney. I go to the parks all the time. But that's not why I like it. I don't like it necessarily because of the IP, because I think they're less, and you'll see why here in a second. I think since the 2000s, their stuff has kind of been rough, but that's beside the point. Disney is a fascinating company to me. And when you get to peek behind the veil and you hear some of the stories, it becomes even more interesting. And I love that. And then you get in, naturally I'm in Los Angeles, so we're around the movie scene because Los Angeles is the seat of cinema for the entire world. So you get to hear some of the drama behind studios and who has rights to what and how that all plays out. And then how your rights to this thing end up becoming the amusement park or cruise line or whatever. It's very interesting to me. And I'll explain that more when we get to Law 12. But one of the stories, and honestly one that I never really got behind, was Snow White. Snow White was the first Disney feature-length animated film. And it was the first feature-length animated film in history. It is a very interesting story. And I have my own critiques on not only the animation style, but also the way that their storytelling is done. We'll get more into that on 2 episodes from now. But this is interesting to me because the story of Snow White goes like this. There is this beautiful young girl who becomes the object of obsession for the evil queen. The evil queen loves her beauty. She loves who she is. She wants to stay the center. She wants to be in charge. And she just hates Snow White. And lo and behold, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? We find out that's because Snow White ends up becoming more fair than the evil queen. So the evil queen sets out to destroy Snow White. Just keep all of that in mind as a Disney story and as a Disney fan. The story really is, and this is straight from the book, and you can confirm this in the book, The Disney War, the conflict between Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg. When I tell the story to my friends, I tell it a little bit differently than this, but I'm going to keep it straight to the facts so you can synthesize your own opinion. So, Michael Eisner became the CEO of Disney in 1984. He came in with Frank Wells as his president, and Jeffrey Katzenberg became the head of the film studio. He was to lead all of the animation efforts. The three of them together orchestrated what became known as the Disney Renaissance. For those of you who are really big Disney fans, technically this started with The Great Mouse Detective, but the big stepping onto the stage was the 1989 film, The Little Mermaid. That was followed by Beauty and the Beast, then Aladdin, and The Lion King. There was also Pocahontas and what was the one with Frollo? The Hunchback of Notre Dame in there. All of those happening. Now, if you can remember that time, Disney was killing it. Every movie was blowing out the box office, and those stories still are the ones that mark an entire generation up until the Goofy movie. And if you want to know more about that, go watch the Making of the Goofy Movie documentary on Disney Plus. Highly recommend. You'll find that Michael Eisner actually fired. I'm not going to ruin the story. Anyway, so they are producing hit after hit after hit. And it is one of the greatest creative runs in the history of American entertainment. And it all happened under Katzenberg's leadership. Well, 1994 comes around, and Frank Wells dies in a helicopter crash. Katzenberg was then expected to be promoted to president. And again, the results justified it, because the dude was killing the game. But Eisner refused. Not because Jeffrey Katzenberg was unqualified. Clearly, he was the best in the game. But because Eisner could not tolerate sharing the spotlight. The mirror, was the box office results, the critical acclaim, the cultural impact that was starting to point all at Katzenberg. And Eisner couldn't allow that. So he drove him out, publicly and dismissively. Katzenberg did something that Eisner never anticipated. He co-founded DreamWorks Animation with Steven Spielberg and David Griffin. So if you actually look at old DreamWorks, it says DreamWorks SKG, which is Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen. And he built a direct competitor. He ended up suing Disney for unpaid businesses, and the settlement cashed out roughly at $250 million. And then Eisner brought in this guy named Michael Ovitz, who was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and he hired him as the new president. And this was another person whose reputation and power threatened Eisner's sense of singularity. So Eisner froze him out and undermined him publicly and fired him just after 14 months. And the severance package from Disney was $140 million. Now we're talking about the 90s. Right? So $250 million and $140 million in the 90s. Disney shareholders sued Eisner over this. By the early 2000s, Roy Disney, who was Walt's nephew, launched a campaign called Save Disney, specifically targeting Eisner. And by 2004, the board had received a 43% non-confidence vote against Michael Eisner, and he announced his resignation in 2005. Now, the person who drove away the man most responsible for his success and then drove away his replacement, then got driven out himself by the people who he had spent years alienating. And this is Greene's principle proven in real time. The act of the grandiose, when tragedy arrives, the people who you undermine will hasten your downfall. Now, I'll say it again. No, I won't. I'll save that for the end. In the Air Force, I watched a version of this play out on a much smaller scale. The grandiose commander received deference to his face and murmurs behind his back. And the incentive structure of the military hierarchy delays the consequence of grandiose leadership and poor character. But it does not prevent it. And the murmurs will always find their way out. I like what Jordan Peterson said, and no one really gets away with anything. The character that you exude will come back and get you, because the mirror always tells the truth. And the grandiose leader is just the last one to hear it. So, why should you care? Let me bring this into your gym, as we do. Grandiosity shows up everywhere in CrossFit. The coach who cannot hear feedback from the members because his ego treats it as an attack. The owner who overexpands after one good year because the business felt like it was proof of invincibility. The athlete who stops being coachable early, guilty, his results convince them that they know better than their coach. That was me, and I paid for it with several injuries. All of this was the same pattern. Success without the challenge produces grandiose leaders at whatever scale is available. And there is a dynamic that makes it particularly difficult to address. And that is that grandiose leaders cannot be spoken to directly. The fragile ego underneath grandiosity treats a direct challenge as a threat to survival. The walls go up immediately, and the person who challenges the grandiose leader becomes the enemy. And that's law 7 and 10 operating at their most extreme form. Which means the people around the grandiose leader learn quickly that a direct challenge is futile. So they adapt. They conform, they flatter, they frame every concern as an affirmation of the leader's vision, and they become sycophants. Now here's the paradox that Greene documents. The grandiose leader is the one most easily manipulated by people in any room because their ego has a door, and anyone with the right key can walk through it. And the key is confirmation. To confirm the grandiosity, to appeal to the self-image, to frame your request as consistent with their greatness. And the grandiose leader will often do exactly what you need them to do, believing it is their own idea. Putting this in two different ways, there's another book that Greene writes called The 48 Laws of Power. This one is never outshine the master. And if you want to see a fictional example that is excellent, go back and watch Game of Thrones and see some of the scenes where Marjorie is interacting with Joffrey. That is the exact thing. Joffrey being the grandiose leader and Marjorie being the manipulator to get him to do what she wants. With all of that, I must draw this line. And one may argue that understanding how grandiosity works and using that knowledge to navigate a difficult leader is simply an effective organizational survival trick. And my position is that it's a short-term strategy with long-term costs. The grandiose leader who only receives flattery never gets the feedback that could save them from their own overreach. And the person who learns to manipulate through sycophancy, develops a habit that corrodes their own character. Between the two, nobody wins in the long run. The gym owner who surrounds himself with yes people is not building a community. They're building an echo chamber. And an echo chamber that does not survive contact with reality. The sustainable path is not sycophancy. It is the Law 7 approach. Confirm the self-image genuinely, build the relationship, and from within that relationship, tell the truth. Be slow, be careful, be gentle, with genuine respect for the person who is underneath that armor. It is the long road, it is a hard road, and it's way more difficult than flattery. It's also the only thing that actually helps. So, to recap, grandiosity is the confusion with the feeling of power and actual power. Early success without character produces grandiosity. It is the outworking of the shadow. Unchallenged success will accelerate grandiosity, and the grandiose leader eventually overreaches into territory where their actual skills do not support their ambition. Grandiosity is the shadow of the weak and feeble ego. Cough, cough, Diddy. It is not too much confidence. It is the absence of confidence and the absence of character. The performance of superiority is a defense mechanism for the person who cannot tolerate the mirror pointing at someone else. Eisner drove out Katzenberg, the man most responsible for his greatest success, and then drove out his replacement. And then he got driven out himself. And the mirror told the truth the whole time. That grandiose leaders cannot be challenged directly. They can be confirmed with better decisions, but that confirmation must come from genuine respect and not flattery. Sycophancy compounds the problem that it appears to solve. Now, closing this out with the evil queen. She asked the mirror who is the fairest of them all, and it said her day in and day out until it didn't. The mirror was not the problem. The mirror was doing its job and telling the truth. The problem was that she had built her entire identity on the answer. So when the answer changed, someone else's greatness became undeniable, and she could not update. She could only attack. Michael Eisner was the evil queen. And Katzenberg was Snow White. And he did take his place. The person Eisner tried to destroy came back, not to seek revenge, just to exist, to do his job. DreamWorks killed the game subsequently. If you know who I'm talking about, they did The Prince of Egypt, Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, Kung Fu Panda, and many more. The mirror is always answering the question. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What does your mirror actually tell you? And are you honest enough to hear when it stops confirming what you want? My name is Colin Charles. This is Enoch Marketing. Please send a like, share the video, leave a comment. We'll go through all of those. Follow us at Enoch Marketing, and we'll listen to you next time.